Ma'am, first class isn't for everyone. People like you should know their place. You don't belong here. The words hit like a slap across the quiet cabin, and every conversation stopped. Passengers froze mid-sip, phones lowered, and a hush fell over the first-class seats. Some stared, some pretended not to hear, but every eye carried curiosity and judgment. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from, subscribe to the channel, and give this video a like. It was late afternoon at Los Angeles International Airport, just 15 minutes before Delta Flight 728 was set to depart for New York. Inside the sleek first-class cabin, soft murmurs and clicking seatbelts filled the air until one moment changed everything. Dr. Amara Coleman, a 42-year-old black CEO and founder of Coleman Aviation Solutions, sat quietly in seat 1A, reviewing notes on her phone for a high-stakes board meeting in Manhattan. Her tailored charcoal suit, Tiffany necklace, and calm composure suggested quiet confidence, not arrogance. But Rachel Harper, a 29-year-old senior flight attendant on her third consecutive shift, saw something else entirely. Frustration lined Rachel's face as she marched down the aisle, her voice sharp, meant to be heard by everyone. "I need to see your boarding pass again." Amara looked up, unbothered, and handed it over. Rachel scanned it quickly, then snapped. "This isn't right. You need to move to coach immediately." A ripple of tension spread through the cabin. Ethan Caldwell, a young tech entrepreneur in seat 1C known for his constant live streams, perked up and grinned, without hesitation. He tilted his phone toward Amara and whispered to his growing audience, "Y'all, we've got a situation here. Someone trying to sneak into first class. Watch this." 47 viewers became 92 within seconds. Rachel, noticing the camera, straightened, sensing an audience. She raised her voice deliberately. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a passenger attempting to occupy a first-class seat without a valid ticket." The elderly couple in 2B gasped softly. Others exchanged awkward glances. But in seat 2C, Sofia Alvarez, a 25-year-old Latina aviation intern, frowned. She had caught a glimpse of Amara's boarding pass earlier. It was clearly printed first class, seat 1A. Yet she hesitated, nervous about speaking against a senior attendant. Amara's expression didn't shift. Her hand rested calmly on her Hermes bag, her voice measured, soft yet steady. "I believe there's a mistake. I'll wait for your supervisor to resolve this." Her composure seemed to provoke Rachel further. "Supervisor?" she scoffed loudly. "Ma'am, you're moving now or I'm calling security." Ethan grinned at the camera, whispering, "She's gonna get dragged out. Wait for it." His viewers flooded the chat with comments, some laughing, others cruel, a few openly racist. The live stream count ticked upward. 175, 214. Amara ignored the buzzing of her own phone as notifications piled in. One from her legal team, another from her assistant. But she didn't flinch. She had lived this before, in boardrooms, at negotiations, in spaces where people doubted her right to belong. What Rachel didn't know was that Amara wasn't just another passenger. She was the CEO of the company leasing this very aircraft to Delta Airlines under a $3.7 million annual contract. A woman who controlled 82 jets in their fleet and quietly held a 14.3% stake in the airline's parent company. But today, she said nothing. Not yet. Rachel's irritation grew with the silence. Without warning, she yanked the boarding pass from Amara's tray, glanced at it, and tossed it back sharply, the paper striking Amara's chest with a dry, cutting snap. The sound landed heavy in the silence, louder than any shout. Sophia flinched. Ethan leaned closer to his phone, whispering, "Oh, it's getting real now." Amara placed the boarding pass neatly back on her tray, adjusted her suit jacket, and looked Rachel in the eye. Her voice was calm, deliberate. "Call the flight manager." Rachel crossed her arms, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Security will handle this faster. She tapped her headset. Officer to Gate 34A, passenger dispute from the jet bridge. The steady stomp of boots approached, and a tall figure appeared. Officer Jamal Torres, a 40-year-old airport security veteran. Calm but firm. Ma'am, he said, eyes moving between Rachel and Amara. I need to verify your ticket. Rachel spoke before Amara could answer, pointing at her. She's refusing to move. Amara turned to Jamal, her voice even, her gaze steady. I've provided my boarding pass. If verification is needed, I'll wait for the highest-ranking officer available. A few passengers exchanged glances, sensing there was more here than anyone realized. Sophia's hands fidgeted nervously as she whispered to Clarence Moore. A retired pilot in 2D. I saw the ticket. It's valid. Clarence nodded grimly but stayed quiet. For now. Ethan adjusted his camera. Delighted. His live stream jumping to 389 viewers. Comments exploded as the hashtag #FirstClassFraud began spreading. Rachel's confidence swelled with each passing second. She mistook the silence around her for support. She turned slightly toward Ethan's phone, almost performing now, and said loudly, Rules are rules. We can't let someone just take a seat they didn't pay for. Amara finally lifted her gaze to meet hers fully. Her tone didn't change, but the weight behind her words did. Everyone here paid. The only difference is how we choose to treat one another. The statement cut through the cabin like a blade, and the chatter died instantly. Somewhere in the back, a passenger stopped recording mid-swipe for the first time. Rachel faltered, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. She folded her arms tightly and said, This will all be sorted when security removes you. Amara didn't move. Her phone vibrated again. Another message from her legal counsel. Media's watching. Keep calm. We're monitoring everything. She glanced once at Rachel, her voice low but firm. Call your manager. Rachel hesitated, caught between procedure and pride, then sneered toward Ethan's camera. This is going viral either way. She wasn't wrong. Ethan's live stream climbed past 500 viewers in under 2 minutes. Sophia clenched her fists, her instinct screaming to speak, but fear held her still. She knew, though, deep down, this wasn't over. The heavy stomp of boots echoed down the jet bridge as Officer Jamal Torres stepped into the first-class cabin, his dark uniform sharp, his expression controlled, and the tension immediately shifted. The air was thick, charged, and every passenger knew this was no longer a simple seat dispute. Ethan Caldwell's live stream had crossed 700 viewers in under 2 minutes, the comments section exploding with opinions, outrage, and ugly assumptions. This is it, folks, Ethan whispered, adjusting the angle to capture Rachel, Amara, and Jamal in one frame. Rachel stepped forward quickly, pointing at Amara with authority she didn't truly have. Officer, she refuses to leave this seat, she declared loudly, her voice deliberately theatrical. She doesn't have the right ticket. Jamal's gaze swept from Rachel's flushed, defensive face to Amara's composed posture, her boarding pass neatly placed on the tray in front of her. Ma'am, I need to verify your ticket, he said calmly, his voice lower than Rachel's but carrying more weight. Amara looked up, her eyes steady, her tone even. Of course. Officer, I've presented my ticket twice already, but if there's any doubt, I'd like the flight manager present before any decisions are made. There was no fear in her voice, no anger either, just an unshakable calm that unsettled Rachel more than she wanted to admit. Sophia Alvarez, sitting in 2C, shifted uncomfortably, her fingers gripping the edges of her seat. She had seen the ticket. She knew Amara belonged here, but her internship was with Delta, and she feared speaking up against a senior crew member, Clarence Moore. The retired pilot in 2D leaned slightly toward her and murmured under his breath, That ticket's valid, isn't it? Sophia nodded, her lips tight, whispering back. First class. No doubt. He gave her a slow nod, but neither moved. The silence, though, grew heavier with every second. Meanwhile, Ethan's live stream surged past 1,000 viewers. Comments flew across the screen faster than anyone could read. Kick her off. This is discrimination. Show the ticket. Delta trending again? Hashtags like hashtag first class fraud and hashtag Delta discrimination began climbing fast. Ethan grinned, loving the chaos, panning his camera toward Rachel, whispering, she's about to get kicked. But not everyone in the comments agreed anymore. A few sharp-eyed viewers paused Ethan's frame and pointed out Amara's boarding pass visible on the tray, clearly marked Seat 1A, First Class. The tide of opinion began to shift in real time. Rachel didn't notice, emboldened by Ethan's camera and Jamal's arrival. She planted her hands on her hips, her voice louder than ever. "We cannot delay this flight for one person," she snapped. "This is first class. Ma'am, people pay thousands for these seats." Amara's gaze met hers, calm as stone, her voice, soft but cutting, carried through the entire cabin. "I paid for this seat. Ms. Harper. As did everyone else here. The difference is, I don't record my passengers to humiliate them." The statement landed hard. Several passengers turned their eyes toward Ethan, who suddenly froze mid-live stream, his smirk faltering for the first time. Rachel, refusing to back down, turned sharply toward Jamal. "Officer, please escort her off the aircraft. We have procedures." Jamal paused, one hand resting lightly on his belt, his eyes narrowing at Rachel's tone. "I'll review the facts before making any decision," he said firmly, his voice grounding the tension. "Ma'am," he added, turning to Amara, "if you could confirm your ID with your boarding pass?" Amara passed both forward without hesitation. Jamal checked the documents carefully, his eyes flicking between the boarding pass, Amara's driver's license, and the flight manifest on his handheld tablet. After a moment, he looked up, his brows furrowing slightly, and glanced toward Rachel. "This pass shows first class. Seat 1A. It's valid." Rachel blinked rapidly, caught off guard, but recovered quickly, crossing her arms. She must have booked incorrectly or used points. That doesn't mean she. Amara cut her off gently, her tone still even. "My assistant booked this directly through Delta's corporate portal. Confirmation code HA392147X. You're welcome to verify it." Her words were calm, factual, and undeniable. Sophia, still silent, glanced nervously between Jamal and Lisa Bennett, the senior flight manager, who had just stepped into the cabin holding a sleek tablet. Lisa, 40 years old and polished, approached with practiced authority. "What's going on here?" she asked, her eyes moving between Rachel and Amara. Rachel stepped forward instantly, gesturing toward Amara with a sharp tilt of her chin. "Passenger dispute, invalid ticket." Lisa raised a brow, taking the tablet from Jamal, scrolling quickly through the manifest, then pausing as Amara's name came into view. Dr. Amara Coleman, Platinum Elite, Priority 1. Lisa hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly on the tablet. But Rachel's live stream energy had swept her up too. Dozens of phones were now recording in the cabin, and Lisa made the critical mistake of siding with her crew without cross-verification. "Dr. Coleman, I need you to step off temporarily while we verify the situation," Lisa said firmly, but without eye contact. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rose from passengers, and Sophia's hands balled into fists. Clarence leaned forward, his voice just above a whisper. "She has every right to be here." Amara looked at Lisa, her expression unchanging, but her words landed like steel. "I'm not moving until you verify your records properly. That ticket in your hand is valid, you know it." Lisa hesitated again but glanced at Rachel, whose nod urged her forward. Ethan's live stream hit 1,500 viewers. Comments now flooded with outrage. Many defending Amara. Ticket says 1A. This is going viral. Delta better fix this fast. Rachel's confidence faltered slightly as she glanced at the camera feed behind Ethan's shoulder, catching sight of hundreds of angry emojis flooding the chat. But her pride wouldn't let her stop. Officer, Rachel pressed, her voice higher now. Escort her out. We can't have her disrupting the cabin. Jamal exhaled slowly, stepping closer to Amara, lowering his voice so only she could hear. Ma'am, I don't want to escalate this. Do you want me to call someone higher up? Amara gave a small nod. Bring me the captain, she said softly. This ends now. Within seconds. Captain Michael Hayes appeared from the cockpit, a veteran pilot with 25 years under his belt, his shoulders broad, his presence commanding. What's the delay? He asked, scanning the tense faces in the cabin. Lisa began to speak, but Amara raised a single hand, offering her business card silently across the aisle. Michael glanced down at the card. Dr. Amara Coleman, CEO, Coleman Aviation Solutions, and his eyes widened slightly. He looked up at her, then at Rachel, and said in a tone that silenced everyone, Dr. Coleman, I was not aware you were aboard. Allow me a moment to correct this situation. Ethan caught the shift instantly on his live stream. Yo, wait, he whispered. She's somebody big. Sophia, finally finding her voice, spoke up loudly enough for the cabin to hear. I saw her ticket. It's valid. First class. Seat 1A. Clarence nodded firmly, adding, I've been a pilot for 30 years. That's no mistake. Rachel's bravado crumbled under the weight of their voices. Her live stream, once an engine for humiliation, now turned into evidence against her. Ethan's viewer count soared past 2,000, and hashtags exploded. Hashtag Delta Discrimination, hashtag Amara Coleman, hashtag Flight 728. The balance of power shifted, quietly, decisively. Amara didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat, didn't need to. Her silence carried more authority than Rachel's shouting ever could, and for the first time since this began, Rachel realized she wasn't just facing a passenger. She was facing the woman who owned the very jet she was standing on, and Amara hadn't even spoken her full truth. Yet. Captain Michael Hayes held Amara's business card tightly, his sharp eyes moving from the embossed gold lettering to her composed face, and a realization dawned on him that made his chest tighten. This wasn't just any passenger. This was the CEO of the company leasing 82 aircraft to Delta Airlines, including the very jet he was piloting today. The tension in the cabin shifted like a gust of wind, invisible but undeniable. And for the first time, Rachel Harper sensed something she hadn't felt all afternoon. Fear. Dr. Coleman, Hayes said carefully, his deep voice carrying across the silent cabin. I need to apologize. I was not aware you were aboard. Ethan Caldwell's phone shook slightly in his hand as his live stream chat exploded, his viewers now climbing past 2,500. Emojis and capitalized comments flooding in at lightning speed. Wait, she's the owner? CEO? This is going viral! Rachel's mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came out. Lisa Bennett, the senior flight manager, shifted uncomfortably beside her, scanning Amara's expressionless face and instantly regretting her earlier decision to support Rachel without cross-verifying the records. The silence was heavy until Amara finally spoke, her voice low, smooth, and controlled, but with an undertone that made even the air feel charged. Captain Hayes. I requested a supervisor 20 minutes ago. Instead, your crew publicly accused me, live-streamed my image without consent, and threatened to have me removed from an aircraft my company owns. Her words cut sharp and clean, but she never raised her tone. Ethan turned the camera back on himself, whispering dramatically, Yo, this is wild! She owns the plane! and the chat erupted, the number of viewers shooting past 3,000 in seconds. Hashtags now trending globally. Hashtag Delta discrimination. Hashtag Amara Coleman. Hashtag Flight 728. Sophia Alvarez, still seated in 2C, exhaled softly as if finally released from an invisible weight, then raised her voice, surprising herself. "I saw her ticket," she said firmly, her voice shaking slightly but growing stronger with each word. "Seat 1A, first class, fully paid, Clarence Moore, the retired pilot," leaned forward in 2D and added with authority, "And I know who she is. Coleman Aviation leases nearly half of Delta's long-haul fleet. This entire incident never should have happened." Rachel's composure began to crack, her knuckles whitening as she gripped her service tablet. I didn't know," she stammered softly, but Ethan's microphone picked up every syllable, his live stream now crossing 4,000 viewers. Lisa Bennett tried to salvage control, clearing her throat and addressing Amara. "Dr. Coleman, we deeply regret the misunderstanding. We'll, resolve this immediately and privately." Amara's gaze moved slowly from Lisa to Rachel, then finally to Ethan's raised phone, and she said calmly, "There's nothing private about this anymore. Ms. Bennett, your flight attendant chose to make this public the moment she hit live stream. We'll resolve it exactly as publicly as it began." Her words landed like steel on glass, and several passengers murmured in quiet agreement. Hayes stood straighter, turning slightly toward Lisa, his voice controlled but sharp. "Lisa, verify everything now, full manifest, and get regional on the line." Lisa nodded quickly, tapping furiously on her tablet as beads of sweat gathered at her temple. Meanwhile, Ethan's comment section exploded in a storm of outrage and solidarity. "She's the owner. Fire Rachel now. Delta stock about to drop." Someone in the chat even posted a screenshot of Coleman Aviation's fleet contract with Delta, pulled directly from a public filing, and Ethan's jaw dropped. "Guys," he whispered into the camera, "her company gets $3.7 million a year from Delta for this plane alone. She literally owns this jet." His viewership passed 5,000. Notifications pinging so rapidly that his phone began to lag. Sophia leaned over her tray table and whispered to Clarence, "They have no idea how bad this looks." Clarence shook his head gravely. "Corporate's going to feel this within the hour," he muttered. Rachel's confidence finally cracked entirely. I was following protocol," she said weakly, avoiding eye contact. Amara turned her attention fully on her now, her expression unreadable, but her voice carrying quiet power. "Protocol does not allow public humiliation. Ms. Harper, it does not allow assumptions based on appearance. It does not allow live streaming your passengers without consent." Rachel swallowed hard but said nothing, her earlier bravado evaporating like mist. Lisa Bennett's tablet chimed loudly, and she glanced at the display, her voice shaky when she spoke. "Dr. Coleman, I've just confirmed your Platinum Elite status and Priority 1 designation. Our Regional Operations Director would like to speak with you directly." Hayes motioned for her to patch the call through his cockpit comm, but Amara raised a hand, stopping him. "Put it on speaker," she instructed calmly. Lisa hesitated but complied, and within seconds Vanessa Klein's crisp voice filled the cabin. Carrying the authority of Delta's Western Regional Director, Dr. Coleman, Vanessa began carefully. "We were just informed of the situation. First, on behalf of Delta, allow me to apologize. You are a valued partner and shareholder. Whatever you need to resolve this, name it." Passengers shifted in their seats, their eyes wide, realizing the scale of what was unfolding live before them. Amara's voice remained steady, deliberate, and quiet. But there was a weight to each word that made everyone listen. "Ms. Klein, you've seen the live stream. You've seen the comments. This isn't just about me. This is about every traveler who's ever been judged before being treated fairly." There was a pause on the line. Then Vanessa replied, "Understood. Dr. Coleman, what would you like us to do?" Amara leaned back slightly, her fingers resting lightly on her Hermes bag, and she said without hesitation, "Rachel Harper is terminated immediately. Lisa Bennett is suspended pending review. I expect a formal public apology from Delta within 24 hours. And starting today, I want a full review of bias training and passenger verification protocols across every flight." The cabin went completely silent. Ethan's live stream chat erupted like a volcano, his viewers flooding the feed with cheers, angry emojis, and fire icons. "She's taking control. This is history. Delta in trouble." Vanessa hesitated only a moment before replying, "Consider it done. I'll personally oversee all changes." Rachel's face drained of color as the weight of Amara's words sank in. Lisa's shoulders slumped slightly, knowing the suspension was inevitable. But Amara wasn't finished. She turned toward the cabin, speaking to everyone, her voice calm but commanding, her gaze sweeping slowly across the rows. "This isn't about one person, one seat, or one mistake. This is about dignity. Every passenger on this plane deserves to be treated with respect. No exceptions." Applause broke out quietly from the back, growing louder as more passengers joined in. Sophia's hands trembled slightly, but she clapped hard, her eyes shining with relief. Clarence nodded slowly, his weathered hands coming together in steady rhythm, a soft smile forming as he whispered, "She's changing the game." Ethan, his phone still raised, turned it back to himself and whispered to his thousands of viewers, "I was wrong. I judged her, just like Rachel did. But she's not just a CEO. She's a force." His live stream topped 6,000 viewers, the hashtags climbing into Twitter's top 10 trending list within minutes. Notifications pinged from news outlets beginning to pick up the story. CEO humiliated on Delta flight, reveals she owns the jet. Amara remained silent as the cabin erupted with applause around her, but her eyes were steady, her breathing calm. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't argued, threatened, or lashed out. Yet in less than 30 minutes, she had shifted the balance of power completely. Everyone on board, from Rachel and Lisa to Ethan and Sophia, now understood the same thing. Dr. Amara Coleman wasn't just a passenger on Flight 728. She was Flight 728, and this was only the beginning. The cabin of Delta Flight 728 was silent. But the silence wasn't calm. It was electric, heavy, full of tension you could almost hear. Captain Michael Hayes still held Amara's business card in one hand, his other hand resting on the seat back as though bracing for turbulence that had nothing to do with the weather. Outside, the late afternoon sun poured golden light through the small oval windows, but inside the first-class cabin, all eyes were locked on Dr. Amara Coleman. She hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't argued. And yet, somehow, she commanded the entire room, passengers, crew, even corporate. Ethan Caldwell's livestream had crossed 20,000 viewers in under 10 minutes. Chat scrolling so fast his phone could barely process the notifications. Comments blurred together. "This is history happening live. Delta stock about to tank. Protect Amara Coleman at all costs." Twitter was erupting. Hashtags Delta discrimination and hashtag Amara Coleman had broken into the U.S. top 3 trending topics. And within minutes, reporters from CNN, ABC, and Bloomberg were tweeting about an incident aboard Flight 728. Rachel Harper stood frozen in the aisle, her hands gripping her service tablet so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. 10 minutes ago, she had felt in control, confident, smug even, live streaming to her 100 followers while mocking a passenger she assumed didn't belong in first class. But now, her live stream had gone dark. Ethan's feed had overtaken her. and nearly the entire country was watching her career unravel in real time. Lisa Bennett, the senior flight manager, swallowed hard and stepped slightly forward, trying to recover some semblance of control. "Dr. Coleman," she said carefully, her voice lower now, deferential. "We've escalated this to our corporate team. Vanessa Klein, our regional director, is on the line. She's ready to implement whatever resolution you request." But Amara didn't look at Lisa. She didn't look at Rachel either. Her gaze remained steady on Captain Hayes, her tone level but loaded with intent. "Captain, before we go any further, I want full verification. I want the aircraft ownership data displayed right now." Hayes nodded silently, motioning to the co-pilot in the cockpit. Within seconds, his tablet synced with Delta's corporate registry, and there it was in bold letters on the display: Aircraft N582CA, owned by Coleman Aviation Solutions, leased to Delta Airlines under contract CA-DL472B, valued at $58.3 million. Hayes exhaled slowly, turning the screen so the crew and Ethan's live stream could see. A wave of gasps rippled through the passengers. Sofia Alvarez's jaw fell open slightly, whispering, "She really does own this plane." Clarence Moore, the retired pilot, shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "This is about to get bigger than anyone thought," he murmured softly. Rachel staggered back a step, finally understanding the scale of what she'd done. I didn't know," she whispered, voice trembling. Amara turned her eyes on her, calm but sharp, and replied evenly, "You didn't ask." That single sentence hung in the air like a hammer drop, and Rachel's composure cracked completely. Ethan's camera zoomed slightly, catching every detail: the pallor in Rachel's face, the tightness in Lisa's jaw, the unwavering steadiness in Amara's expression. Lisa's headset pinged with an incoming priority connection, and Vanessa Klein's voice came through sharply over the speaker. "Dr. Coleman, this is Vanessa. Our legal and PR teams are fully briefed. We are prepared to take immediate action to ensure your concerns are addressed." Amara's reply came measured, deliberate. "Immediate action won't undo the humiliation your staff caused me or the passengers who've witnessed it. But you will make changes starting today." Vanessa hesitated, then said cautiously, "What would you like us to implement?" Amara leaned back in her seat, her voice steady and precise, every syllable audible even over the rising hum of passengers recording on their phones. "Mandatory bias training for every crew member in this company. Updated passenger verification protocols to prevent arbitrary accusations. A dedicated passenger hotline for complaints handled directly by senior management. And as of now, Rachel Harper is terminated. Lisa Bennett is suspended pending review." The cabin erupted. Gasps, murmurs, flashes from phone cameras as passengers leaned in to capture her words. Ethan's live stream count jumped past 35,000, hearts and angry emojis flooding his screen. "She just fired the attendant live," someone commented. Another wrote, "Delta's about to get destroyed." Vanessa's voice, calmer now but tight with urgency, came through again. "Understood. Dr. Coleman, those actions will be confirmed within the hour." Amara didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. She simply nodded once, then turned to face the cabin, addressing the passengers directly for the first time. "Everyone here saw what happened," she said softly, but her words carried through every corner of the cabin. "This isn't about me. This is about dignity, how we choose to treat one another. That matters. Every traveler deserves respect, regardless of appearance, background, or status." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, not from anger, but from the weight of decades of quiet battles she had fought in boardrooms where people doubted her. Sofia Alvarez was the first to start clapping, tears brimming in her eyes. Clarence joined next, his palms coming together firmly, then a couple in row 3, and within seconds, The entire first-class cabin applauded loudly, some passengers standing, others nodding with admiration. Rachel remained frozen, her breathing shallow, her world collapsing around her in real time. Lisa stood stiffly beside her, shoulders tight, knowing suspension was the least of her worries. Ethan lowered his phone briefly, turning the camera toward himself, his voice hushed but reverent. I came on this flight thinking I'd catch a funny moment to roast online, but I ended up filming history. I judged her, I mocked her, and I was wrong. But outside the cabin, chaos was spreading even faster than inside. Vanessa's team scrambled at Delta's corporate office, their phones ringing non-stop as news outlets picked up Ethan's live stream feed, replaying clips where Rachel accused Amara of scamming her way into first class, juxtaposed against the aircraft ownership data shown live minutes later. Bloomberg broke an alert banner. Delta crisis. CEO humiliated on Flight 728. Owns jet involved. CNN's social feeds spiked with video snippets. Twitter crossed 80,000 mentions within 15 minutes. Delta's stock had already slipped 2.3% in after-hours trading. Amara sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, letting the storm build without raising her voice. She had learned long ago that true power didn't shout. It waited. Sophia glanced at her, her voice barely audible as she whispered to Clarence. She's going to change the industry after this. Clarence nodded solemnly. She just did. He said, Ethan's live stream reached 50,000 viewers as the chat lit up with breaking news alerts and trending tags. Sophia finally took out her own phone and began live streaming in Spanish, translating Amara's words for her audience back home. And within minutes, her small stream hit nearly 3,000 viewers, multiple languages, multiple platforms, one story. The story of a black woman who had been humiliated for daring to exist in first class, only to reveal she owned the very jet she was sitting on. Rachel finally broke her silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Coleman, I'm sorry. Amara turned her gaze toward her slowly, her face unreadable, and after a long pause, she said softly, You'll have time to reflect. Choose to use it well. In that moment, every passenger knew something fundamental had shifted, not just on Flight 728, but in the way the entire industry would operate from this day forward. And Amara Coleman hadn't even begun. The first-class cabin of Delta Flight 728 no longer felt like an airplane. It felt like the center of the world. The once private confrontation had transformed into a national spectacle, playing out live across tens of thousands of screens. Ethan Caldwell's live stream, now topping 10,000 concurrent viewers, was mirrored by Sofia Alvarez's Spanish-language stream, which had surged past 12,000 viewers on TikTok. Passengers in economy, unaware at first, were now watching clips on their own phones, whispering about the black woman in seat 1A who had just taken control of an entire airline mid-flight. Rachel Harper sat frozen in the aisle, her hands trembling around the edge of her service tablet. Her earlier bravado had evaporated completely, her lips parted slightly as if to speak. But no words came. Lisa Bennett, the senior flight manager, stood a few feet behind her, her jaw tight. Headset pressed close to her ear as instructions from corporate poured in rapid fire. The situation had escalated far beyond Delta's control. Vanessa Klein's voice returned over the cabin speaker, sharper now, urgency in every syllable. Dr. Coleman, this is Vanessa. Corporate legal and executive leadership are monitoring the live stream and the trending hashtags. We need to act fast to contain reputational damage. Amara Coleman leaned back slightly in her seat, her posture graceful, her face composed as if she were presiding over a boardroom rather than sitting aboard an aircraft. Her voice remained steady, measured, and unshaken. Containment won't erase what happened. Vanessa, transparency will... There was a long pause on the line before Vanessa replied quietly. Understood. Amara's gaze shifted toward Rachel, who still hadn't moved. Effective immediately, Amara said, her tone low but carrying enough weight to silence the cabin. Rachel Harper is terminated. Remove her badge and access credentials the moment this plane lands. Rachel flinched as if struck, her breath catching audibly, the tablet slipping from her grip and clattering softly to the carpet. The live stream audience erupted instantly. Ethan's phone pinged so rapidly that he had to silence notifications. Comments flooded in at dizzying speed. Fired live. Accountability in real time. Delta stock already falling. Lisa Bennett, sensing her own position crumbling beneath her, straightened her posture and stepped forward carefully. "Dr. Coleman," she began, her voice low and deliberate. "I take full responsibility for not verifying protocol sooner." Amara's eyes turned toward her, calm but piercing. "Responsibility," she said softly. "Isn't words, Ms. Bennett, it's action." Lisa nodded stiffly, tears threatening to break through her controlled expression. Vanessa's voice returned through the headset, audible to Lisa but picked up faintly by nearby passengers. "Lisa Bennett is suspended, effective immediately, pending full investigation." Lisa exhaled slowly, closing her eyes for a moment before stepping back, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Captain Michael Hayes cleared his throat, his deep baritone steady but quieter than before. "Dr. Coleman," he said respectfully, "Delta Corporate has requested we prepare an incident report for immediate review upon landing." Amara nodded once, her tone even but firm. "Prepare two. One for corporate, one for my legal team." Ethan's camera panned briefly to capture Hayes's reaction, his composed face betraying only a flicker of realization at her last words. In less than 30 minutes. Amara Coleman had shifted from passenger to power broker, and now the stakes reached far beyond this aircraft. Back at Delta's Atlanta headquarters, executives scrambled in a crisis room as trending hashtags lit up national dashboards. Hashtag Delta discrimination, hashtag Flight 728, and hashtag Amara Coleman dominated Twitter's top 10, while clips from Ethan's live stream hit CNN, NBC, and Bloomberg within minutes. By the time the live CNBC ticker flashed across phones nationwide, Delta stock plunges 4.7% after viral first-class incident. Panic had already set in among investors. Delta's board chair had been alerted, and calls from institutional stakeholders were pouring in, demanding immediate intervention. In the cabin, passengers whispered softly, their phones buzzing with alerts. Sofia Alvarez's fingers trembled slightly as she refreshed Twitter, murmuring to Clarence Moore, "It's everywhere. CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, everyone's covering this." Clarence, the retired pilot, nodded knowingly, his voice low and steady. "I've seen bad PR hit airlines before, but never like this. She's going to change the entire industry." Sofia glanced toward Amara, her admiration undisguised. Amara reached into her leather Hermes bag and retrieved a sleek business card holder, sliding a single platinum-edged card across the tray table toward Captain Hayes. "If corporate has questions about ownership," she said, her voice smooth and deliberate, "remind them that Coleman Aviation Solutions leases 82 aircraft to Delta under active contracts. Remind them the annual value of those leases exceeds $3.7 billion over the next decade. And remind them," she paused briefly, letting the silence carry weight, "that I personally hold 14.3% equity in their parent company through Pinnacle Equity Partners." Hayes blinked, stunned, while nearby passengers gasped softly. Ethan turned his camera on himself, whispering hoarsely into his mic. "Did you guys hear that? 14%. She owns 14% of Delta's parent company. This isn't just a CEO, this is one of their bosses." His chat exploded instantly, topping 12,000 live viewers as hashtags like hashtag Amara owns Delta shot to the top of trending lists. Rachel sank into the nearest empty jump seat, covering her face with both hands as cameras from every angle captured her unraveling. Lisa stood rigidly, her headset still on, absorbing instructions from Vanessa's crisis team. Vanessa's voice returned, more urgent now, cutting through the murmurs. "Dr. Coleman, I've been authorized by the CEO's office to extend a formal apology on behalf of Delta Airlines. A full public statement will be released within the hour." Amara nodded slightly, her expression controlled, her tone even. "Good. You'll also issue a direct apology to every passenger aboard this flight. What happened here will be corrected in policy, but it will also be corrected in culture." Ethan swung his phone around, catching the reactions of fellow passengers. A woman in row 3 dabbed at her eyes, whispering to her husband, "She's fighting for all of us." A businessman in 2F muttered under his breath, "I've flown Delta 20 years. I've never seen anything like this." Sophia, finally finding her courage, pulled out her phone and started her own live statement in Spanish, translating Amara's words for her audience. "Esta no es solo su historia, es nuestra historia," she said softly, her voice trembling with pride. "This isn't just her story, it's ours." Meanwhile, Ethan's viewer count surged past 15,000. National news anchors began referencing his live stream directly, embedding clips across social feeds. Delta's stock dipped further, crossing 7.2% down in after-hours trading, triggering automated volatility alerts on Wall Street. Investor forums lit up, speculating about potential shareholder lawsuits, while Pinnacle Equity Partners, Amara's private investment firm, saw a sudden 3.1% surge in valuation. The balance of power had shifted publicly, undeniably, and irreversibly. Amara finally spoke again, turning toward Captain Hayes, her voice quiet but commanding. "Resume preparations for departure. We're not delaying this flight another minute. People have schedules. People have lives. We'll arrive on time." Hayes nodded quickly, stepping back toward the cockpit with newfound deference. Rachel remained silent, her head bowed, her breathing shallow. Lisa exhaled softly, looking drained but resolute, while Sophia gave Amara a small, grateful nod from across the aisle. Ethan ended his stream temporarily, shaking his head as he muttered quietly, "History. I just filmed history." As the engines roared softly beneath them and the plane began to taxi toward the runway, one truth settled over the cabin like gravity itself. This was no longer just a viral moment. This was a reckoning. For Delta, for the airline industry, and for anyone who had ever doubted a black woman's place in a first-class seat she'd earned 1,000 times over. And Dr. Amara Coleman was just getting started. By the time Delta Flight 728 reached cruising altitude, the cabin had shifted from tension to awe. The roar of the engines hummed steadily beneath them. But inside the first-class cabin, the only sound was the quiet clicking of phones as passengers scrolled through headlines exploding across every major platform. CNN, Bloomberg, and BBC were live streaming Ethan Caldwell's footage directly. With viewership topping 3.8 million concurrent streams worldwide, Ethan's once modest following had transformed into a breaking news pipeline overnight, and his live stream, which now exceeded 22,000 active viewers, was being clipped, translated, and shared in real time across TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Hashtags Amara Coleman, hashtag Delta discrimination, and hashtag Flight 728 dominated global trends, appearing on feeds from New York to London, São Paulo to Seoul. Rachel Harper sat rigid in the jump seat at the front of the cabin, her face pale, her uniform creased. As she stared blankly at the floor, Lisa Bennett remained in the galley, headset clutched tightly to her ear, receiving continuous updates from Vanessa Klein and Delta's crisis team. They had confirmed Rachel's termination, Lisa's suspension, and the immediate initiation of a corporate audit. But this wasn't about two employees anymore. This was bigger than Delta. This was about an entire industry reckoning with something it had ignored for too long. Amara Coleman sat composed in seat 1A, her hands folded neatly in her lap, the soft light above her catching the subtle silver edges of her Tiffany necklace. Her phone buzzed with notifications she ignored, hundreds of missed calls, thousands of unread messages. Journalists wanted quotes, investors wanted statements, politicians wanted meetings. But Amara wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about what came next. Captain Michael Hayes stepped out of the cockpit once more, his usually steady demeanor replaced with reverence. He cleared his throat before speaking softly. "Dr. Coleman, the CEO of Delta's parent company is requesting a private call." Amara shook her head gently, her tone calm but firm. "This isn't private anymore. Captain, they can listen, but we're doing this in the open." Sofia Alvarez, still seated across the aisle, glanced up sharply at those words, admiration glowing in her eyes. Clarence Moore, the retired pilot, nodded approvingly and whispered under his breath, "That's leadership." Vanessa Klein's voice returned over the cabin speaker, audible to everyone. Her tone carried the gravity of a corporate executive under immense pressure. "Dr. Coleman, after reviewing the footage and live data, Delta Airlines is implementing immediate policy changes. As of tonight, we are launching a zero-tolerance protocol for discriminatory conduct, a complete overhaul of passenger verification procedures, and mandatory bias training for every frontline employee, including executives." The announcement triggered a wave of murmurs through the cabin, passengers leaning toward one another, whispering. "Did you hear that?" Ethan, still live streaming, tilted his phone back to his own face, speaking into the camera with an intensity he didn't have an hour ago. "Guys, you're watching real change happen live. This isn't just about one seat or one woman. This is about how companies treat their customers. Period. Dr. Coleman's making history right here, right now." His comments section flooded instantly with applause emojis, raised fist icons, and messages of support from around the world. Watching from South Africa, love from London, greetings from Brazil. Sophia started her own bilingual feed alongside Ethan's, translating Amara's words into Spanish as thousands of her viewers joined in, sharing personal experiences of mistreatment during travel. Amara waited until Vanessa finished, then finally spoke, her voice measured but carrying an undeniable weight. "Vanessa, I appreciate the immediate response, but this isn't about protecting Delta's reputation. It's about protecting the dignity of every passenger, every crew member, and every professional in this industry. Discrimination has no place in aviation, or anywhere." Her words landed with the gravity of a keynote address, recorded on dozens of phones in the cabin and broadcast to millions online, within seconds. Ethan's live stream viewer count surged past 35,000. Then came the first ripple effect. CNBC broke a flash alert. Delta announces sweeping reforms following Flight 728 incident. FAA to review new anti-bias protocols. Wall Street reacted immediately. While Delta's stock remained volatile, Pinnacle Equity Partners, Amara's private equity firm, saw an unexpected 6.4% surge, investors betting on her influence to stabilize and modernize the industry. By the time Vanessa returned on the line, her voice was different, no longer defensive, but collaborative. "Dr. Coleman, we want you to partner with us to lead these changes. The board is prepared to create a dedicated passenger equity council under your guidance." The cabin erupted in quiet gasps. Sophia covered her mouth, her eyes widening in disbelief. Clarence leaned back in his seat, a slow smile forming as he muttered, "She's rewriting aviation history before we even land?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She folded her hands, closed her eyes briefly, and exhaled slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But my conditions stand. These reforms must be public, transparent, and enforced. No exceptions. Vanessa hesitated for only a moment before replying. Understood. Consider it done. Meanwhile, the outside world was moving at lightning speed. ABC News streamed live interviews with aviation analysts, calling the incident a defining moment for Delta. TikTok exploded with trending clips, some highlighting Rachel's words, others replaying Amara's calm responses, framing her as a symbol of quiet power. CNN ran a headline banner, "Coleman versus Delta, the viral flight-changing corporate America," at the same time. Thousands of everyday travelers flooded Delta's customer service channels, demanding accountability and praising Amara's leadership. Within an hour, over 78,000 public complaints citing discrimination were logged across U.S. airlines, forcing the FAA to announce a review of industry-wide standards inside the cabin. The atmosphere had transformed. Passengers who were silent earlier now approached Amara quietly, thanking her for standing up not only for herself, but for them, too. A young mother in row 3 leaned down, tears in her eyes, whispering, "I've been profiled before. Nobody ever listened." "Thank you." Amara placed a gentle hand on hers and said softly, "Everyone deserves respect. That's all I asked for." Sophia wiped at her eyes discreetly, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Ethan ended his first live stream and immediately started another, switching to a direct conversation with his viewers. "We're not just watching news," he said passionately, leaning toward his phone. "We're part of a movement right now. I judged Dr. Coleman when she boarded this plane. I thought I knew her story just by looking at her, and I was wrong. And if I can admit that, then so can this industry." His words resonated with viewers, and the chat exploded with support. Ethan's second live stream crossed 500,000 viewers in under 10 minutes. By now, Delta's executive leadership had gathered in an emergency meeting in Atlanta, live streaming Amara's statements directly into the boardroom. Vanessa confirmed internally that Delta would allocate $120 million to fund the Passenger Equity Council, spearheaded by Coleman Aviation Solutions. FAA representatives joined the call, citing the potential for Amara's framework to set federal industry standards. Captain Hayes, returning to the cockpit, glanced once more at Amara before he left, his voice low but firm. "I've flown for 25 years. I've never seen a passenger command this much respect, or change this much this quickly." Amara met his gaze, her reply simple but heavy with meaning. "Sometimes the seat you fight for isn't just your own." By the time the cabin lights dimmed for evening cruising, passengers scrolled through endless headlines. Sophia's bilingual stream hit 9,000 viewers, and Ethan's main feed crossed 1.1 million views total. Clips of Amara's quiet defiance had gone global. This wasn't just a trending story anymore, it was a turning point. For the first time in hours, Amara closed her eyes briefly and exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reform, about rewriting an industry that had, for too long, looked the other way, and she wasn't done yet. 6 months later, the world still remembered Flight 728. What began as a confrontation in a single first-class cabin had grown into a movement reshaping an entire industry. Dr. Amara Coleman's quiet defiance had sparked something larger than she ever intended, a cultural shift in aviation and beyond. Today, at the newly unveiled headquarters of the Equity in Transit Foundation in downtown Chicago, reporters gathered beneath a massive glass atrium as Amara prepared to speak. Behind her stood representatives from the FAA, CEOs from 4 major airlines, and community leaders from across the country. The foundation, launched with $150 million in initial funding, had already assisted 1,200 travelers who filed discrimination complaints, resolving 93% of cases successfully across the nation. 4 major carriers had adopted Delta's reformed bias prevention protocols, and the FAA had formally adopted the Coleman Protocol, a federal standard designed to ensure dignity and transparency in passenger treatment. Ethan Caldwell stood near the front of the press crowd, no longer just a tech entrepreneur, but now one of Amara's closest collaborators. His live stream of the incident had become the most watched aviation-related video in history, surpassing 42 million total views across platforms. Today, he was live streaming again, but his tone was different, no longer mocking, no longer searching for clicks. This isn't just a story anymore. He told his audience of nearly 800,000 live viewers, this is a blueprint for change. We watched one woman transform an industry by refusing to be humiliated. Beside him, Sofia Alvarez prepared to translate Amara's speech into Spanish, her voice steady, her presence transformed from a nervous intern into the Foundation's Director of Community Outreach, Clarence Moore. The retired pilot who spoke up on Flight 728 now served on Delta's newly formed Passenger Equity Council, advising leadership on policy reforms. Amara stepped forward to the podium, her posture poised, her voice strong yet warm. 6 months ago, she began, I sat in seat 1A of Flight 728, where I was publicly accused, humiliated, and treated as though I didn't belong. But what happened that day wasn't new. It wasn't rare. It wasn't isolated. It was a reflection of a deeper problem. One too many travelers face silently every day. She paused, scanning the crowd, letting her words settle. That day, I decided silence wasn't an option anymore. Cameras clicked rapidly, and the audience leaned forward, captivated. We launched the Equity and Transit Foundation not to win headlines, but to protect dignity, not just my dignity, but yours, because whether you fly economy, business, or first class, respect should never be optional. Applause erupted softly, building until the room echoed with it. Rachel Harper wasn't at the event, but her name wasn't forgotten. After her termination, she avoided public interviews, spending months attending diversity training programs voluntarily. A small, unexpected twist came weeks later when Amara invited Rachel to join one of the Foundation's listening sessions anonymously. Today, Rachel worked quietly with a local nonprofit advocating for fair workplace policies. Lisa Bennett, the suspended flight manager, returned to Delta after her review, dedicating her position to ensuring crew members receive ongoing training in ethics and inclusivity. Neither woman escaped accountability, but neither was discarded, either. Amara believed transformation required growth, not destruction. Delta's reforms became a model for the industry. Discrimination complaints across U.S. airlines dropped 81% within 6 months, and more than 1,800 staff members completed mandatory empathy and bias training. Airlines adopted passenger dignity protocols, requiring verification before public accusations. The FAA endorsed Amara's framework as the national standard, nicknamed the Coleman Protocol in her honor, making Flight 728 a case study now taught in aviation schools worldwide. Ethan's voice broke slightly on his live stream as he panned across the crowd. We all saw her on that plane, he told his audience quietly. She didn't yell, she didn't threaten, she just stood in her truth and forced the world to listen. Sophia's translation echoed softly over his audio feed, ensuring viewers across Latin America, Spain, and Mexico understood the full weight of the moment. In just 6 months, Amara's story had transcended borders, sparking conversations about dignity and representation on every continent. As the applause faded, Amara concluded her speech with a promise. We cannot undo every injustice, but we can make sure silence never protects it again. We can choose action, we can choose humanity, and if Flight 728 taught us anything, it's this. Power doesn't come from owning jets or stocks or companies. Real power comes from using your influence to protect those without it. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Cameras flashed, audiences online flooded Ethan's chat with hearts, clapping emojis, and simple three-word phrases. We choose dignity. Standing in the crowd, Sophia glanced at Clarence, whispering softly. She's changed everything, hasn't she? Clarence nodded, his eyes moist, replying with quiet conviction. She didn't just change the industry, she changed us. And as Amara stepped away from the podium, the weight of Flight 728 transformed fully from controversy into legacy. Her story had started in humiliation, but ended in hope. Proof that dignity wasn't negotiable and change wasn't impossible. For millions of travelers, from crowded gates to first-class cabins, she had redefined what respect looked like and turned one painful moment into a movement that would outlast her lifetime. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe, like, and comment below where you're watching from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.